Nora.
Thank you. My name is Christine Payne. First, I'd like to thank you for giving us all an opportunity to, I thought I was going to get to know you a little bit better. So first, a concern and then a question, if I may. For you to earn the A rating with the NRA, you would have virtually had to have answered yes to every part of the candidate questionnaire for Virginia, which would mean that you are theoretically in favor of K through 12 schools allowing guns on our college campuses, permitless carry, and you would be opposed to universal background checks. So as a mom of 3 teens, I would have to say that that is a very egregious position. But I would like to ask you actually about your tax cut program. The tax cut for all Virginians. So I have an MBA, but I can't work your numbers. And I'm reading by everybody else's estimates but your own that your plan would drain about $1.4 billion with a B dollars from our state budget, and those at the top of the income bracket would marginally benefit a great deal more than lower and middle income families. That's the math that's on the table right now. You use the same metrics as Kansas with Governor Brownback, and they're having some very bad consequences to those tax cuts, similar to your proposed plans. In the Commonwealth, we would have a very difficult time meeting ends meet, letting our ends meet in terms of public safety, public schools, and deep cuts in our transportation system if your numbers were to reflect over 3 years the cuts that you were planning on making. So I'd have to ask, how do you justify your budget cuts given the fact that as a state we are bound by balanced budget requirements?
Let me take them one at a time. In terms of draining $1.4 billion from the Treasury, that's not the case. The tax relief would amount to $1.4 billion in revenue not taken from taxpayers, but it would still increase revenue by $2 billion according to the projections for the revenue estimates. It's over a 5-year period, which is what the plan is based on. So we project over the next 5 years in the Commonwealth, even with anemic economic growth like we have right now, you get some revenue growth. And we're projecting $3.4 billion in increased revenue over the course of the next 5 years. What I'm saying is let's increase spending by $2 billion. But for every $3 that we increase spending, let's allow for hardworking Virginians to keep $2 in their pocket, not send it to Richmond. It is an across-the-board rate cut, and so every taxpayer benefits from it. And it's true that higher-income people pay more taxes than lower-income people, but the fact is the top tax rate in Virginia of nearly 6%, it's 5.75%, kicks in at an income level of $17,000 a year. I didn't say $70,000, I said $17,000 a year. So 70%, 7 in 10 Virginians pay the top individual income tax rate in Virginia. And if that's the case, then probably 98, 99% of small business owners are paying the top rate, because small business owners don't pay the corporate rate. Like I said, S Corps and LLCs, they pay in the individual rate code, and so they would benefit, and I think that's an important consequence. But like I said, it would be higher take-home pay for hardworking Virginians who haven't seen their wages rise for way too long now. 1.7% wage growth last year is stagnant wage growth. And so this is not accurate in terms of actually draining money out of the Treasury. It would be, under a static analysis, less money coming into the Treasury, but I want to go to that point. So Kansas is very different from what I've put forward, because Kansas didn't have what I have put in my plan, which is revenue triggers. If that $3.4 billion in projected growth does not materialize, the tax cuts would, depending on how high the revenue were, and I'd work with the General Assembly to get these in the right place, but we wouldn't jeopardize our AAA bond rating. We would not jeopardize core government functions. Kansas didn't have that safeguard, what they did. Now, 11 other states have used that safeguard and had triggers for their tax relief, and they've worked well. unlike in Kansas, where I know the situation you're talking about. It's one of the reasons I embraced the triggers, was to guard against that. But let me go to a broader point. And so my point is that you would either slow down the phasing in of the tax relief or it just wouldn't come. We will protect the AAA bond rating and core government functions first before we allow for the tax relief to kick in. But here's the thing. You know, the problem we've had with revenue in Richmond for the past 3 years, really, is that the economic stagnation has resulted in revenue crunches. And there are 3 significant factors that underlie the revenue shortfalls that we've seen. The first is that we hit a 10-year low in labor force participation rate last year. Too many Virginians have given up entirely looking for work, and they've left the workforce. And if you've left the workforce and are not looking for work, you're not paying any income taxes. Too many Virginians are working part-time instead of full-time, 28 hours a week when they want to work 40 hours a week, and the tax revenue from 28 hours in wages is less than the tax revenue from 40 hours in wages. And the other thing is, for a decade now, we've been swapping out high-paying jobs for low-paying jobs. And the tax revenue from low-paying jobs is smaller than the tax revenue from high-paying jobs. We've got to address that underlying fundamental, challenge that we have, because last year's economic growth of 0.6% was not an aberration. It was part of a pattern. For 6 straight years now, Virginia's economic growth rates have been below the national GDP rates. And for 5 of those 6 years, our economic growth has been below 1%. And that's what's resulting in the pie being stagnant. And so my view is, let's unleash these 53,000 plus new additional full-time private sector jobs all across the Commonwealth, a 25% increase over current projections. Let's get more taxpayers in higher wage jobs working full-time. And that will actually result in more revenue, I believe, over time coming into the Treasury and alleviating a lot of these crunches. Now, I want to be clear, and I'm not sure you mentioned your name. What is your name?
It's Christine.
Christine. I want to be clear to you, Christine, and to everybody else. My tax cut, the revenue projections are not based on that dynamic effect. I'm not assuming that those 53,000 jobs are going to come and that revenue is going to come and therefore we can cut taxes. I'm basing it on the current projections based on the current economic growth rates. But the biggest thing we can do to ease the burden crunch in the Commonwealth of Virginia is to increase economic growth here and not have another 5 out of 6 years where our growth rate is below 1%. That's a great question. The number that we put out in terms of the saving was median, not mean. Or it was mean, not median, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes?
Oh, sorry.